Hey folks, welcome back to the Meta Abuse Podcast. I'm your host, Battle Mode, and I've got Drexy and Shaun with me this week.
Hey all.
Going on, boys?
It's going good, mate. It's going good. We actually came together to do a podcast today. We didn't manage to get enough people together to do a video podcast. And we've got a couple of, sort of more planned podcasts actually in the running. But we thought that this week we'd actually just go through some news while we're waiting for Lucid and Daz and the other guys. So yeah, let's go ahead. So what has actually happened recently in the news? Well, one of the first things that I noticed, and this is not new news, but we actually missed it the first time it happened, and that is the Switch 2 was announced, and the Nintendo Switch. I don't know whether you guys really use one. In fact, I don't think Shaun has one, but I know Drexy has got a Switch.
Yeah, which I've used maybe 5 times. It was one of those COVID purchases, and I thought I'd play it more than I would. I played the Zelda game for a bit, and I bought loads of games for it as well, and I just never got around to going back to it. It's just been sat there gathering dust.
Yeah, the last one I had was a 2DS. I tried to talk myself into buying the Switch, but I really only play Fire Emblem on it, because I got the 2DS and I think I had a Pokemon game and Fire Emblem and something else, and then I went up just never using it and I sold it, and then I was just like, I can't justify the Switch because there's really only 1 or 2 things I'd play on it. So I somehow went up with the Steam Deck instead.
Yeah, I use my Switch quite a lot, but I mostly use it for action games. So I know you guys mostly know me from playing strategy games and, war games and that kind of stuff. I play all kinds of things, and the Switch was a good opportunity for me to be able to play some games with my fiance, and just the two of us together sat in front of the TV and just playing Super Mario Kart or whatever. So I never really took it that seriously as a console. It was just something that was kind of fun to have. But I use mine all the time. Like whenever I go away, I usually, if I go on a plane trip or something or a train journey, I'll usually have my Switch with me, and then I kind of catch up with all the stuff that I've got on it, because I do periodically buy Switch games, usually in the sale. So mine gets a lot of use. I was looking at the Switch 2 and trying to figure out like what is actually new about it. I did watch the video. So from what I can see, it's got bigger controllers, and the controllers look better. Now that is a big thing, I think, with a console, if they improve the user interface and they improve the way that you interact with the games. And it looks like it's got a bigger screen. Yeah, I think so, Drexy.
Yeah, basically, it's almost more like it's called the Switch 2. It's definitely more of a refresh than a totally new console. The issue I had with playing the Switch 1, like handheld mode, was the controllers were too small for my hands. Like I had a 2DS as well. Well, I've still got it, and I had to buy like a grip for it, because I don't know, maybe it's just like, this is going to sound a bit racist, but Asian people tend to have smaller hands.
That's true.
I think that's what it is. And for my big hands, I just get cramps playing those things. So I don't know. Maybe the
it's racist, man. They're not made for African descent people.
Yeah.
Damn Japanese.
But even with the Steam Deck, I had issues with that until I put a case on it, which just kind of, I think the way my hands are, the bottom has to be broader than the top, sort of thing. Whereas with the Switch, the way they do them, and they're just like straight down. So, but it's bigger. I guess a better battery in there and a upgraded processor. They're different because they're using a NVIDIA processor, which everyone else uses AMD. So, but I don't think, like the Switch 1, I don't think it's going to be like, PS5 sort of level. It's kind of still slightly older tech.
I read something about this a while ago. Weren't they saying it was supposed to be roughly equivalent to a PS4, which is still kind of impressive for a handheld?
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. You have to remember that when the Switch came out, it was actually using old hardware. So it released, and I can't remember the full story, but it was something like they ended up having to use a really cheap old graphics processor, I think. So the Switch was always underperforming compared to what it should be performing at. So any improvement to that's going to be a big improvement, I think.
Well, it's the NVIDIA Tegra chip or something like that, and it's still an NVIDIA Tegra chip. It's just an updated thing. Apparently, it does have some ray tracing capabilities this time around. But I mean, like you said, it's a PS4 power.
So it's old. I mean, but the PS4 still looks good.
So it's still not going to be like super new.
I was using a PS4 recently. I've got a PS4. I bought one to play Virtua Fighter with until Revo came out on Steam, and I was impressed. Like, I was like, I don't understand why anybody's shelling out for a PS5 when the PS4 basically looks. It kind of looks the same to me. I can't tell the difference. Like, and I guess part of the reason is because I've got a really good gaming PC. I have to have one for work, so I don't really care about my consoles that much. But I actually had the opportunity to get a PS5 because we got one really cheap, and I wasn't that bothered. We just ended up selling it because it's like, if we got a PS4, we don't really use that very much. Why am I going to just have a small upgrade in graphics? Is basically why I saw it as.
Well, this is an issue that I've been having with the whole gaming thing at the moment. Because the use of Unreal Engine, games are more demanding than they should be, in my opinion. Like you're saying, a lot of the PS4 games still look great. And it's just because all these AAA companies are forcing themselves to use the latest Unreal Engine game, which for some reason demands a lot of power, even though the games don't look that much better, in my opinion. And one of the perfect examples of this is the new Monster Hunter game that's just come out. Now, granted, it's Capcom, and Capcom are notorious for releasing PC games very unoptimized. Looking at, what was it? That Dragons game? Dragons Thing
Dragon's
2, or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
That's it. So
they're using the RE engine too, so they're using their own engine for that one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But that's come out that plays terribly on PC, and I've seen screenshots, and you look at some of these textures, and they're absolutely terrible. You're like,
how is it that games are getting worse? Like, I mean, I think you're touching on something, Drexy, which I think is a lot of people are starting to suspect now, which is games developers. I mean, I've talked about this quite a lot recently, but games developers are too big. They have massive overheads. They're often taking big loans in order to be able to finish these big, expensive AAA games they're making. And so they're having to cut corners wherever they can. And one of the most noticeable things that they're doing is they're moving over to stuff like Unity and Unreal rather than actually working on their own in-house engines like a lot of developers used to. I mean, that was standard practice, right? Back in the day, you wanted to make a game, well, you got to make an engine for it. It was part of the same thing. And, having engines that could be used across games, that kind of came later. That was like much later. And you can kind of tell games that are made in Unity. I mean, let's not even go, we're not even touching on the whole sort of like shared asset library stuff that you get with Unity. Like all these, a lot of strategy games just reuse the same assets and stuff. And that kind of bugs me. I think that people go on and cry about the AI art thing, saying how it's all slop. But to me, it's no worse than people just reusing Unity assets. I think that's worse because that's lazy. At least the people who are using the AI have actually taken the time to try to make something new, even if it's just kind of regurgitated new. But in terms of Unity itself, it does seem to be kind of badly optimized. And for example, I bought a copy of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black recently, and that's made in Unreal Engine. So that would be Team Ninja. So Team Ninja have made this game. I'm pretty sure they must have had their own engines for years to do all the Dead or Alive games and the original Ninja Gaiden games. But people are reporting that the input lag is kind of slow. So, like purists for arcade games, they take input lag really seriously. If you're playing a fighting game, right, and you've got 5 frames of input lag, that's serious. Whereas, so people who play Ninja Gaiden properly, they take this really seriously. It's like the same as the shmup community. Like you've got to be able to play these games pixel perfect and frame accurate. And a lot of people are speculating that the reason why Ninja Gaiden 2 it's got some frame issues and it's a little bit slow, and they reckon it's because of Unreal Engine. It's not very well optimized for that.
Well, yeah, Unreal Engine's had a big problem with stuttering on the PC that, I don't know, they're struggling to fix. And the other thing which I did want to talk about is games having the minimum specs, saying you should be using at minimum DLSS, upscaling, or FSR, at worst frame generation, which you're talking about latency. The problem with frame generation, I think if you don't have, I think, a minimum of 30 frames per second before you turn it on, it increases the input lag like crazy. Like I'm talking up to like 80 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds input lag if you're sort of under 30 or 60 frames per second. It should be there for people who've got like 60 frames per second, but they want to play it on like 144 kilohertz monitor or 200. What is the other one? 200 and whatever. I don't know. I don't know what these monitors. I've still got a shitty 75 hertz monitor, so they're relying on these technologies. I just find it really strange. Brand new game.
They're relying on it to basically be able to sell the game to people with computers that aren't, basically to avoid having to do their own hard work in terms of optimization. I originally speculated that the talent was kind of draining out the industry because a lot of the original programmers who were doing the hard work of making engines and this low level, close to the metal programming, often in stuff like assembly language, and you're using languages like C, which aren't really used so much now, I don't think, in a lot of gaming. I think they've moved up into management positions, a lot of them, or they've moved out the industry. Now, I've had a few people push back. I know a lot of developers, and I've had a bit of pushback over that. And I understand that. I wasn't trying to be offensive. I'm just saying that I think that was my initial speculation. Now I'm thinking, yeah, I think it's more to do with just cost cutting. I really think that that's what it is. They're using stuff like Unreal and Unity because it's so much cheaper than developing your own in-house engine. But the problem is, Unity is like a one-size-fits-all tool for creating games in. And if you, like, for example, the company I work for, Stardock, they make their own game engines still. They still do that. And you can tell because the games that are designed to run on those things take advantage of all the engines, all the engine can do. Whereas with Unity, you've got to kind of jam your game into what it can do. And remember all that problem that Distant Worlds 2 had? Like Distant Worlds 2 with that Stride engine, and Codeforce had to hack the engine. They had to actually make their own build of it in order to be able to get it to work right. And that was using someone else's engine. But they actually at least they did that. They actually went in and changed the engine themselves in order to be able to get it to do what it did. Sorry, Shaun, go ahead, man.
I was going to say, I think you're sort of right about the cost cutting, maybe, because we see with big studios too. I was just thinking in particular, it was 343. I think they call it Halo Studios now. But for ages, every time they made a Halo game, they'd make their own engines. And then with Infinite, they used the Slipspace engine that they made for that. And I mean, I played it. It ran pretty well. I don't think anyone really had issues with the engine. They just had issues with other stuff. But now the next one, they're looking at using Unreal 5. They were saying we're going to stop doing it anymore because it's too much work. But then they also had all these issues when they were making Halo Infinite because they were hiring contractors and they kept firing them every 6 months or whatever, and then nobody had any time to actually learn how to use the engine. So it was just an absolute clusterfuck, basically. And so now they're all using Unreal Engine because everyone knows how to use it. So it's like a cost-cutting thing, but also a way of onboarding people easier. And I was just thinking, it's a little bit of a random tangent, but I was thinking that's why, like, because I'm a truck driver, right? And a lot of places now, they'll get trucks that have automatic transmissions or transmissions that are easy to drive, because then you're widening your pool of candidates that can drive the truck. So it's easier to get hires. So it's kind of a weird analogy, but I was thinking maybe studios are doing a similar sort of thing. They want to use an engine that everybody knows how to use so that it's easier to get staff and put them straight to work, kind of thing.
Yeah, by the way, I don't think Unity is actually a problem anymore, Ben, really. I mean, yes, it is a problem, but I think it's more smaller developers, sort of double A at most. I don't think any AAA studios are using Unity. They are using Unreal Engine. And the thing with Unreal Engine is I know a lot of universities teach Unreal Engine, and even my uncle works for like a local college, and they actually teach Unreal Engine in. So like Shaun was just saying, they can get these guys who've just come out of university that all they really know is how to use Unreal Engine, and they're not, it's going to sound mean, but they're not really good programmers. they just know how to use Unreal Engine, and obviously, when you got a development team of 400 people, you've got like, I bet you've got like loads of people just doing a tiny task each in Unreal Engine. And I don't know, I think games were better when less people worked on the games, and those people who worked on the game were really, really good at what they did. They're not just, I think the whole Google sort of campus style thing has came into gaming, and it's just bad.
I agree.
It's just that sort of mentality where they're okay at their job, but they're not great, and I don't even think they're incentivized to become really great at what they do.
Just think back in the day, you had, developers like id Software, and, they had John Carmack as their one of their programmers. I mean, John Romero is no slouch at programming either, but John Carmack, I mean, he's top of his game, without a doubt. Clearly one of the best programmers that the world has ever produced. And I don't, obviously it's a little bit disingenuous to hold one guy, but I do think that the quality of programming, that the depth of knowledge that programmers used to have back in the day was much higher. And that's why I see a lot of bad advice given on games development forums. And in my opinion, it's really bad advice, because people come in and they go, I want to make my game. What should I use? And everybody goes, oh, well, you want to use Unity or you want to use this? And I always say, look, I've never completed a game. Okay. So don't take my advice. However, if you want to be a good programmer, and I'm a decent enough programmer, right? And I would suggest that you go and try to make a game and just do it from scratch. Go and use SDL2 or something in C, SDL2 or something like that, if you really must use a library. But try to make everything yourself in a basic game, because that is going to make you a way better programmer than trying to pick apart somebody else's code, which is basically what you're going to be doing with, I mean, I guess you're doing that with SDL, but that's what you're going to be doing with Unity. You'll learn to think around the problem, and that will develop a level of intellectual development and problem-solving skills you will not get if you're just a code monkey who puts stuff together in Unity. Now, the argument against that is, oh, well, you'll never complete your game because blah, blah, blah. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, just don't, if you are serious about making games, you're really serious as an indie developer, just go and start small and just start programming, do small programming projects. Because I think at the end of the day, if you're serious about being a programmer, then that's what you're going to become a better programmer as a result of that. Then you can go in and use Unity and you can understand what it's doing. But if you just jump straight into that, it's like people who start programming and they immediately start using an IDE. It's like, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. You really need to just go straight into programming with a note, just using Notepad or something, because it teaches good practices, such as, being careful with your typing, learning to be able to read text properly, being able to read stuff properly, rather than having everything highlighted for you or the autofill. That just teaches really bad habits. And I think it's the same with, I think a lot of these young developers have not actually jumped through those hoops. They've not learned to program the hard way. And I think if you learn to program the hard way and learn games development the hard way, you're going to be more useful to your team than if you've jumped straight into using all these assisted tools. And this problem, by the way, is going to be way, way compounded with AI stuff as well. If you're immediately using ChatGPT to help you with your programming, unfortunately, you're always going to be reliant upon it.
I will agree and disagree with you there, actually. I think if you're making a small indie game, right, that's not very graphic intensive or whatever, and you're more of an artist, or you just have a good idea and you're not a programmer, those engines are, and there's been a lot of good small games that have come out with people using, like, especially like now Godot's taken over, which I think is way better than Unity. But I think for someone like that, who you're making a small indie game that's not very hardware intensive, then I don't have a problem with you using one of these engines. The problem comes now with these companies that are the AAA games that are pushing hardware really hard. You'll get to the point where you're relying on frame gen and upscaling and that, rather than having the code knowledge to utilize that hardware a lot better. And you're then leaning on these things to make these games. But these are like, these are meant to be the pinnacle top using the latest technology, blah, blah, blah. But if you're just making a small indie game that you're going to sell for 10, 15 quid, that's mostly 2D graphics. You should at some point maybe learn. You should always learn programming without relying on the engine. But if you just got a cool idea and it's not like, like we're saying, like something like Monster Hunter or whatever the latest Assassin's Creed game or whatever, I don't think you need to be a really great programmer. The problem comes when they want you to use like massive textures and shaders and all this stuff, and you're relying purely on like using Unreal to do that, then you're going to become a cropper. So yeah, I agree and disagree basically.
Yeah, I'm sort of going to get a little bit esoteric here again, but esoteric, Jesus. No, I was thinking, I think it's a lot to do with just the way that the world's changed too, and it's not even related to just the programming industry. And it's like, it used to be your job was sort of like your lifestyle too. You learned how to do everything from the ground up. And this applies to a lot of other different industries. You'd start at the ground level. You'd be doing like some shit kicker role. Like you'd learn everything inside and out. Then you'd go to the next stage. You'd have like your apprenticeships kind of thing. And then you'd level your way up. And it's not really like that anymore, particularly with like the big companies. And I was thinking this applies to like your devs too. They don't do these programs anymore. They don't start you at the ground level and you learn everything as you go. They just want, it's kind of applying to truck driving more than anything, but they don't want someone who's learned all this stuff from the ground up. They just want a bum in a seat. And it's the same kind of thing, I think, now with like your programming and your software industries and that kind of thing. Particularly with bigger companies, they don't want someone they don't care whether you've done all this stuff or not. They just want someone who can sit down and get to work kind of thing.
Basically, you got 20 people doing what probably one guy used to do maybe 10 years ago. I think that's how we've got to this state now.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So, and because, these people are relying on these tools, they did a college course and they know how to do something in Unity. And, well, instead of one guy doing this, we'll just divide one guy that's really good. We just divide it into like 20 people doing the same job, basically.
So I think the way that I think about these things is always, it's partly... my attitude towards these things is usually do it yourself. And the reason is because I'm very much focused on self-development, in the first, as the foundation of what we should be doing, right? As the foundation of how humanity moves forwards is always self-development. Your critique, Drexy, was very good. If you want to make a game, you don't always want to be spending an extra 6 months making a game engine or something. I understand that. But because I think I'm always thinking about how can we become better at stuff? How can the world be better? If everybody had that depth knowledge of learning to program by banging their head against programming for a year, longer than you would do if you just went to, because I did programming at university. I did a computer science degree or a related computer science close, adjacent degree. And I've seen how they teach it. And I was way ahead of my peers in programming, a lot of them at least. Some of them were geniuses and they were just amazing at it. But because that's what happens when you go to a uni. But for the most part, people they hadn't done it before, and the way they taught it didn't really, they were taught in a very regimented way, and I don't think that it really teaches you how to actually problem solve. Now, obviously, at university, you're going to be getting a broad education that should hopefully teach you some problem solving skills, but not everybody does that. If you're just going straight in and you're being taught how to use these tools, they're immediately using IDEs, so they weren't getting that, they weren't getting that knowledge of how to read a text file. Like I was taught to read code backwards. If you've got a bug or your something's not compiling or whatever, you read it backwards, right? They weren't teaching any little tips like that, like this stuff that programmers figured out how to do in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and passed it down to other programmers. They don't learn stuff like that. It's all really regimented. So when I say to people, I think you should try to use, to build everything yourself, it's because I'm coming from this vibe of trying to make people better, like making you better at what you do. I accept the criticism completely that that's not going to be the best way to make a game necessarily. But I'd argue that in the long term, if you are committed to making a game, taking that extra year to become a really good programmer first is going to be well worth your time. And these companies a company who hires 10 guys like that, that's going to be worth 100 code monkeys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think games are not all about programming. You've got guys who have been in the industry, game designers, that probably don't know how to code at all. And if you're making a small game, like I said, and you've got really good game design ideas, I don't think you should be bogged down with things. The 400 people working on these big games, they're not game designers. They don't have great ideas. They should be code monkeys, or they should be experts at doing, putting the time to doing 3D modeling, animation, stuff like that. But what you said is right. If you're one of those people, you should know you should know all the best practices. You should have put in the work to do that. But I think, like I said, if you're making like something like Celeste or Super Meat Boy or something like that, I don't think you need to be a great programmer. You should be able to rely on game engines, because you'll have like maybe one guy that's really good at art and one guy that's got a good game design head and has got a good idea, and they should be able to rely on an engine. My problem comes when you go to these big companies that are making these cutting-edge games. Everyone who's working on this should be, like you said, they should be able to program without an IDE or anything like that. But the way the industry's gone now, all it is you should be good at using Unreal Engine or something like that, rather than being a good programmer.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I can see a flaw in my own argument, and that's I'm probably coming at it from an indie game perspective, in the sense that, a lot of these developers are solo developers, or they're working in very small teams. I think things do change when you make big games, without a doubt. So you have to have specialists, like you need animators, you need artists. I understand that. I'm just trying to extrapolate what I'm saying, though, in the general. I think, for example, let's say you hire an artist who only knows how to use AI tools in order to generate artwork. Okay, this is a bit of a contentious topic, but I'm just going to use it as an example, and we'll try to avoid the political stuff behind it. But let's just say, the analogy that I'm using is that I think everybody who's in the roles needs to have struggled with their craft and their art a little bit, rather than jumping into using the advanced stuff. Now, I know that doesn't always get quick results, but what it does mean is that when you do run into a problem, like, for example, I don't know exactly what happened with Distant Worlds 2, and I can't remember. Some of it might be NDA'd information, I'm sure, so I don't want to talk about it too specifically, but I know that that some of the issues they were having with Distant Worlds 2 were because of the game engine. I know that much is public knowledge, and they made their own branch. Now, I forget his name now. Eric? No, it's not Eric. Eric Rutins is the producer. The other guy, Elliot. So Elliot is obviously a competent programmer, because he was able to go into that Stride engine and make his own make a branch of it and create his own engine. So that is what I'm talking about. Now, that if you haven't got the ability to actually go in and understand other people's stuff and tear it to pieces and break it down and build your own things off it, then you are naturally setting yourself up for a lot more work in the long term. And here's the other thing, Drexy, and I think you've kind of like skirted around this topic. When you use an engine like Unreal, you are beholden to Epic, or whoever it is who owns it. Yeah, it's Epic, isn't it? You're going to be beholden to the developer of that engine for updates, if there's bugs, if they break something, if they change their terms of service. There's so much crap. I mean, remember all that hoo-ha over Unity when they started saying that they were going to start charging people, indie developers. I can't remember exactly what it was now, but
it was
basically
per install. Yeah, they wanted to charge them per install.
That was it, yeah. I think even like patches or whatever, you had to pay for patches and something crazy like that.
I know. I know a guy who works on who actually works for Unity, and that caused them a big problem. and cause them a big problem.
Who the fuck looks at that and thinks, yeah, that's a good idea, let's do that? Like, that's just so mind-bogglingly bad.
Yeah, especially when you've got Godot. Like, Godot is a free engine now, and it's getting pretty good.
And it's
like
open
Drexy
source
said.
as well, which means
Completely
you can
open
actually
source.
go in and change the engine if you need to. So Godot's going to, well, it's already started to take over from Uni, I believe. A lot of people seem to be switching to it because of that issue and because
That's
it's
what I'd be
open
using.
source.
If I was going to use a game engine, I'd be using Godot as well, I think. Although I think that's had its own issues recently, but we're kind of getting a bit off topic with that.
Yeah, but I mean, you did make a good point. Like I said, there was that starting point problem with the Unreal Engine on PC, and I don't think even if you're a really good programmer, the way the Unreal Engine sort of works, it's kind of up to Epic to fix that, and there's nothing that game developers or very, very little game developers could do to fix that. The other thing I've been wondering is like, why don't a lot of these companies stick to Unreal Engine 4 rather than, they seem to all just jumped onto Unreal Engine 5, which clearly has issues and needs a lot of fixing. I believe, personally, they could have made the same game in Unreal Engine 4 as well. Even if you are going to use an engine, why jump so quickly to the latest edition? I don't know.
Yeah, and we are seeing all sorts of issues with it. Like, I play a lot of shooters, and almost all of them, bar I think one, have come out and they've had like horrendous performance problems and all that sort of thing. And then so you're stuck with UE4 that's got issues. It's kind of a crapshoot, right? Like, you're stuck with either with the older engine that's got issues that are never going to be fixed, or you move over to the new engine, and it runs like crap and people don't really know how to work with it.
Well, I'll just finish this up. I think the big problem we've got, which I know we're going to, or you guys at least are going to discuss in another episode, is that basically it's all down to shareholders, and shareholders want to see numbers go up. And this is the problem with gaming, or at least with AAA gaming. You know, you're beholden to, these companies that say, well, you got to put microtransactions in because we have to make such and such money this quarter. So ruin your game by putting all these microtransactions in.
Yep, I completely agree. Like Drexy's saying, I think we're going to get together and do a like a more structured video episode along with Lucid and whoever else we can get on for that one, because that's one that's going to require a little bit of research, because I quite like just sitting here and just chatting about opinions, but I think when we're trying to kind of approach a topic that could potentially be that we want to kind of know what we're talking about, right? And I think that one, there's all sorts of politics and opinions that are kind of tied into it. And I think it would be good to get some facts and some numbers that we can then kind of talk our opinions around, if you follow me. I think we should move on. Let's talk about the shutdown of Monolith Studios. You guys know a little bit about this one, I think.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this, actually. So Warner Brothers have, from what I've heard about Warner Brothers, their gaming division has been struggling for ages. And then they had some pretty major flops, like, Rocksteady made Kill the Justice League. And anyway, now they have shut down 3 different studios. So they've shut down Player First Games, Warner Brothers San Diego, which are working, one of those two was working on that Marvel, I can't remember what the Marvel game was again, damn it, that Mario Brothers.
Wonder Woman?
Oh, no, not that one.
It was a Marvel fighting game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like that Super Smash kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just talked about this before, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, Multiverses. That was it, yeah. I keep thinking of Rivals every time, even though it's not that. Yeah, but the big one that was really surprising was Monolith Productions. I don't know if anybody really saw that coming. So they're currently working on they were working on a Wonder Woman game. And apparently they had to reboot it partway through development and start again. So it's been going for quite some time now. I think it's like 5 or 6 years they've been working on this. And the entire studio just got canned, which was really surprising because Monolith Productions has been around forever and they've made some really incredible games. I mean, they made Fear. And when I bought an Xbox 360 as a teenager, that was my first game console. I bought that myself. And it came bundled with 2 games. One of them was The Elder Scrolls Oblivion and the other one was Fear. It was freaking awesome. I haven't really seen anything that does AI that well to this day. And then they also worked on the Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor, and Shadow of War games for Warner Brothers. So, yeah, no, it's really surprising that they got canned over this.
Yeah, and this is sort of going back to what we were just talking about, actually, because the Shadow of Mordor was like well received, and that was a really good game. And then the Shadow of War, when that was released, they were like told to put in all this microtransaction stuff in and all sort of crazy stuff to generate more revenue, and basically ruin the game. I think we were talking about this earlier, me and Shaun, and he was saying, the game, all that got patched out, but it was like 2 years after the game was thing, and by that time, it's kind of a dead game by then.
Yeah, I remember when they did the reveals for Shadow of War, it looked sick. Like, it basically looked like the first one, but just cranked to 11 with the Nemesis system, and you had like crazy base sieges and all this sort of thing. There was just some insane stuff. And then they launched it, and I remember there was a discussion, and I think it might have actually been Monolith employees maybe talking about it in a forum somewhere. Like, this isn't privileged information or anything like that, but there was something about it launched, and then people were just like, oh, hang on, what's the go here? Like, there's microtransactions, and there was this crazy... I played all the way almost to the end of the game. And the further along you get, like past a certain point, you just run into this crazy grind, and you basically can't get past it unless you go and buy stuff. So it's one of those Ubisoft style, pay for convenience kind of things. And there was a whole bunch of people cracking up about it. And then they went and had a talk. They were complaining in forums and stuff. And I think it might have actually been Monolith employees were saying, basically, yeah, Warner Brothers made us do this. Like, we had to find a way to put it in, and this is what we ended up with. And then, later on, they did it was a 2.0 update. I can't remember how far down the track it was, but they did do it, and they fixed the end game grind, and they got rid of the microtransactions, and they basically made it how it should have been in the first place. But then, like you said, by that point, it's too late. No one really cares anymore. They've already moved past it. So, yeah, that was really disappointing because it was otherwise an incredible game.
I actually tried to play Shadows of War again recently, and I found that the hallmarks of modern gaming, let's call them, were just a little bit too in your face for me. You remember that meme that came out with, what would Elden Ring look like if it had an Ubisoft UI? It was all that stuff, like, yellow paint everywhere, telling you where to go, like, immediately. The boss, the enemies are just massive HP sponges. I didn't really, I wanted to enjoy it, and I think I did. I like this story. I thought the story, the whole thing where you kind of like, you got this thing going on with Shelob, and it was interesting. It's not a bad game. What I can see what they were trying to do with it, but I found that it was a bit grindy. Now, I don't mind grinding in games if it's fun. If the gameplay loop is fun, I'm a grinder. I love grinding. I love grinding in Dark Souls, which incidentally makes the difficulty completely trivial if you do that. So it kind of ruins the game in Dark Souls, but. I didn't really feel like Shadows of War was actually that fun and worth grinding in, because it became kind of a bit samey. The Nemesis system is very, very interesting. I'm going to give them, that's not new though. That Nemesis system basically comes from classic roguelike games. It's just the Tombstone file stuff. That's basically
sorry to jump in. I heard they actually copyrighted that Nemesis system, apparently.
Yeah, they did. Warner Brothers did. It's until like 2036 or something crazy. Yeah.
They shouldn't do, because, look, there's a direct lineage. I can't remember. I think it was Roguelike Radio did an analysis of this, where they showed you how what was originally called the Tombstone file in a classic roguelike. I'm trying to remember the first one it was in. It might have been LAN, but it might have been NetHack. But basically, when you die, the game records who you were, what your score was, how much gold you had, and it records, like the circumstances of your death. And it displays a tombstone and goes, here lies battle mode, died because he got killed by a slime on level 5. And that was the start of games remembering what kind of happens in the game. And that developed and developed over the years until, a very refined version of this is the Nemesis system, where it remembers who you attacked. You kill an orc leader, and then another one comes in and takes its place, and then it starts generating story events. Shadows of War and Shadow of Mordor before it were really good fun for that, because they gave you this it felt like a living, breathing world, and that is really, really cool. I'm not going to lie. The fact that they've copyrighted that is kind of hilarious, though, because I don't think they're the first people to do stuff like that in gaming.
I mean, the other issue I've been having recently is, Ubisoft is finally maybe dying or something I've heard, but I don't know. I think the biggest problem with gaming is the gamers. And here's what I mean by this. I think people give these companies too much leeway, and I think hype leads people into buying games which they really shouldn't. And the only way you can teach these companies how not to release shit games is by not buying the games. You got loads of people out there who just buy a game, pre-order a game, and just over and over again. I think you can look at Blizzard. Blizzard are finally getting their ass kicked by the consumers. Diablo 3 was terrible, and people still went out and bought Diablo 4, knowing full well that Blizzard who made Diablo 2 and not the Blizzard that have been making Diablos. And it took Path of Exile 2 to come out to show all these Diablo fanboys, well, I'll say Diablo 3 fanboys, look, this is what your game should have been like.
Well, the dinosaurs are being pushed out the market, I think. And a lot of these smaller developers who are doing really well are up and coming. I've kind of been very critical of Age of Wonders, but Triumph Studios, man, they smashed it with Age of Wonders 4. I'm not going to lie. Well, even if it's not always my taste, to my taste of game, that reached a big audience. They reached a big market with it. And I think, I think companies like companies like Firaxis really need to look at smaller up and, sort of less big developers who are coming up and doing things like Age of Wonders 4, where they're just selling massive amounts to a very, very tough crowd, right? Because the 4X community is a tough crowd. And they've got a lot of casual gamers involved in that as well, which is bringing people into the genre, which is a good thing ultimately. These old, like Ubisoft and Blizzard and all that, they're too big. They're dinosaurs. They're, I'm not saying that, I don't mean any harm to them, because I want them to do well. I want them to be better. But the problem is they're just too big. They're totally married to these policy, these DLC policies and stuff because they need the money. But yeah, we're kind of banging on about the same thing. You get the idea.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, leading along with the vein of the whole Monster Hunter thing, I don't know if you guys have heard of a game called Dauntless. It's from a studio called Phoenix Labs. So it was basically meant to be sort of like a free-to-play competitor to Monster Hunter. And it was out on Epic Games for ages. I played it not long after it launched for a while, and it was pretty good. And they sort of struggled along for a while, I think, and then they got bought out by a crypto company. And they released this update. They finally launched it on Steam. They released it with this really just garbage update that ruined the game and locked everything behind paywalls and took away people's progress and just completely sunk the game. And now they've been shut down as well, which I thought was wild. Apparently they were trying to figure out, they've got this crypto company and they're trying to figure out how to put crypto in the game. And then, which, you can do. People make crypto games, but it's like, how are you going to do that when it's already several years, when it's already been out for several years? I don't know how you jam that in. But yeah, so the company Phoenix Labs has just shut down as well because this update basically sunk the game, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, it's sad, and it's, again, it's just sort of more evidence of what we're talking about, that money is unfortunately a necessity in life, but it is the driving factor behind a lot of these games. And so I feel quite lucky that I got into indie gaming, because I think indie gaming it kind of shows us what the world can be like if we're not completely focused by money. Now, don't get me wrong, I am not saying that even solo indie developers making their little hobbyist games don't put elements of their game in that is there purely to help drive their own sales, because they do. But you can tell games that are made without that. Like, think about Shadow Empire, right? Now, Vic Rikers, he definitely put stuff in the game to make the game easier for people. There's no doubt about it. It's full of that sort of stuff. However, he just stuck to his vision, and I think the idea was, well, if it sells, it sells. If not, I'll just have to do something else. And that is a perfect... Oh, Dominions is another one. These games, they're perfect examples of what happens when somebody sticks to their vision, understands the market that they're working towards, and doesn't really compromise. They compromise in some ways, but the compromises that are made are smart and play in, and they play into the design of the game. Like Shadow Empire's got some automated stuff that makes it easier for new players to get into, especially on the easier difficulties. But it doesn't make the game worse for veteran players. It's genius because those automated systems are actually stuff that when you get good at the game, you can kind of indirectly affect, and that's where the real meat of the economic gameplay comes in. And I think that is like, so he killed two birds with one stone. He made it exciting for veterans who are really good at the game mechanics, and the same mechanics also help new players. How genius is that? And I think that is the kind of forward-thinking stuff that I would like to see in games where people have thought about it really, really carefully. They don't just go, okay, well, I need more people to play my games. Let's remove the difficult bits of the genre, which was a big criticism that I had about Age of Wonders 4. It really felt like they'd just hacked out core components from the, or core elements of certain parts of the Fantasy 4X genre in order to make the game easier. And I really didn't like that. Daz did successfully argue that despite that, they've still made a great game around it. And I think he's right, actually. I think Lucid doesn't agree, but I definitely agreed there. So I know that it can, you can still make good games while still making stuff kind of scrubby for new players. But at the same time, I just think there's better ways of doing it. So yeah, and look, man, if a crypto company bought out a developer, that developer must have been like, oh, great, wow, we got all this, we got all this money behind us. Great, this is going to be awesome. And then their shitty, money first policies end up shutting them down in the end. It's just a tragedy as far as I'm concerned.
Did we really speak about Marvel Rivals? We've had the DeepSeek that came out of China that's absolutely wiped the floor with a bunch of Western AI companies. And now we've got this Chinese game that's took a concept that was made by Blizzard and just made it so much better. Do you think, I know it's a bit scary to think considering, the way China's is run, but do you think Chinese companies can come in and actually fix the gaming industry? Because you've got a lot of scummy pro stuff happening in China as well, but I don't know, man.
No, I don't think they'll fix the gaming. No, I don't think they'll fix the gaming industry. I think they'll provide some competition, but they've also got the the CCP restraining bolt on everything they do, unfortunately. So that's a problem. And then they're just as money oriented as anyone else.
Yeah, but they haven't come in with scummy business practices that Western companies think. They have a battle pass, but all it adds into the game is like skins and sprays and stuff like that. It's not play to win stuff, which, funny enough, all that stuff actually did come from the East in the first place. Let's not, especially from Korean games. A lot of the Korean MMOs, I think, is where all this stuff started. So I don't know, man. I don't
really know enough about it. I'll be honest with you. I don't really know enough about it to be able to form a big opinion on it. My gut tells me that no, they'll basically be the same.
But for the time being, they will forego some of that stuff to get market share. And then do you think Western companies will look at that and think, oh my God, they're eating our lunch. Maybe we should, stop doing all these scummy practices we've been doing, and so we can compete with these Chinese companies.
The stuff that's going on in America at the moment is quite interesting because it will very likely have knock-on effects all across, from the political level down into the economic level, down into everything. And I think that I'm kind of remaining optimistic to see how this does affect the gaming industry, because I think that something's got to change, right? Particularly with the AAA industry. It was making more money than Hollywood, like a lot more money than Hollywood. And I think that that's going to change, because I think gamers are really, really pushing back against crappy AAA company policies. Now, I played Black Myth Wukong, and that game, it's not, I don't think it's as good as everyone says it is, but it's quite limited really what the game is, but you can tell that it was made with love. There's a lot of effort gone into that game, and the developer who made that, they put their heart and soul into it, what it is. So in terms of, if the Chinese developers and Chinese market keep putting out games of that kind of quality, at least in terms of the amount, they're clearly trying to, they're trying to make stuff that is artistically great and great gameplay, then why not? And I think that the Western developers need a kick up the arse because of what they're doing. I mean, I think the Japanese are certainly starting to become a little bit wary of some of the stuff that they've been taking on from the Western games developers in terms of the social stuff. I know that for a fact. I see the pushback all the time. The Japanese have finally woken up and gone, right, we don't want this stuff anymore. So yeah, I think that there's going to be competition, and hopefully that does push the market on.
I think Marvel Rivals is kind of an exception too, because it's part of a process where, because the kind of stuff that we don't really want to see, like the crazy over the top monetization, you see it a lot in the mobile game market. There's a bit of it. There's some of it in the PC market, that too, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as the mobile market. But I think the Chinese studios are slowly realizing that we don't like that over here. Every time they try and push it, people push back against it really hard. And then they've also got other practices that people don't really get on with, like with, was it Delta Force when that came out? People didn't realize until after they'd started playing it, because there's a battle pass, and they realized, they might sit down and they want to no-life it and play 8 hours a day or whatever. They realized after a certain point they weren't gaining any more progress on their battle pass. And turned out that apparently that was tied into a Chinese policy where they don't they essentially try to force people to take a break from the games by limiting how much XP they can get on their battle passes. So, which I actually kind of thought was a good idea. I don't know, like on one hand it's kind of, let people do what they want, but on the other it's like, try to encourage people to get outside and touch some grass kind of thing. So yeah, kind of in two minds about it. But I think for them it's sort of a learning process. They're learning what does and doesn't work in the West, and we're seeing changes. Like with your Marvel Rivals, it doesn't have crazy egregious monetization. And if you you look at Marvel Rivals, they could monetize the shit out of that. It's Marvel, you can just pump out paid skins, emotes, just whatever, and they haven't really done it. So that's cool. But then they're also going back and working on these traditional models, and you've got companies like NetEase that are actually pivoting, and they're not really dealing so much with Western companies anymore, and they're pivoting more towards backing their own companies and that. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to fix it, but I think it was Ben said, they could certainly become a competitor in their own right, and they're already well on their way to doing it.
I just thought I'm totally wrong about a thing. Suddenly all the gacha games have popped into my head, which are probably the most egregious of that sort of practices. So stuff like Genshin Impact and stuff like that have got really lean heavily into the monetization. So no, I don't think the Chinese are going to come in and save us.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like Rivals.
I do really fucking love Nikkei though. That's the only gacha game that I'll play, and God, I love that game.
Yeah, but that's what I mean though. Rivals is more of the exception, not the rule. I think when it came out, I haven't even played it. I remember listening. There's a couple of other podcasts I listened to, and there's some people on it that are really into it, and they were talking about it when it first came out, and they were surprised that it wasn't filled to the hilt with monetization stuff. So I don't know, maybe it means there's some kind of corner that they're turning, or they are adjusting to how the West do it. And then saying about would it force the West to adapt? It's like, well, maybe, but a lot of these companies, they're big ships and they don't turn very fast. There's a whole bunch of bureaucracy and red tape and just crap in the way. So I think eventually they're going to have to, but it's going to be some time before we see any real change in that area.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? It's funny. I was just thinking about Nikkei. That game makes so much money. And do you know why? Because it's fan service. They actually give gamers what they want. It's like jiggly boobs and bums while machine guns are firing. It's not even that great a game, but they've put so much effort into it in terms of the story, the single player content. They just keep people playing. And now it's not, the gacha stuff is, people spend money on it and it makes a lot of money. But it's not one of these things where they're just, it's just kind of total random rewards. They've actually put a hell of a lot of decent content in, and they clearly love what it is that they're doing. So I think this is a lesson that if you actually give people what they want, they will buy it. The Western developers, and again, we're skirting close to the political stuff here, but Western developers have continually gave people their own, they've pushed their politics into games, and gamers don't want it. They want fan service. They want jiggly boobs and, sexy girls shooting guns. They don't want political messaging. And I think that is a big reason why a lot of these developers are failing, to be honest. I think they're just putting out games that people don't want, and they're putting out shoddy quality games as well.
Another issue I forgot to bring up earlier as well was, I can't remember who did the video. They did a video on this whole thing, and they basically went into the guy who's leading the Warner Brothers games and his history. He basically was like a marketing guy. He worked for toy companies and stuff like that. He had nothing to do with games, and now he's running that Warner Brothers games. And I think a lot of AAA game companies have the same sort of leadership, where it isn't someone who's come up through the ranks of making games and now they're heading the companies. It's actually just basically marketing guys and businessmen who have probably never even played a game in their life. I think that's probably a big issue as well.
Yeah, let's wrap up, guys. I do want to know what it is that you've been playing. I've actually found a really cool game this week, and it kind of relates to some of the stuff we've been talking about, and one of the reasons why I like it. So there was a game released in about 2017 or 2015, depending on whether you're playing on console or not, called BlazBlue Central Fiction, and it's a beat-em-up. It's like an anime fighter beat-em-up made by Arc Systems Works. So they're the guys who did Guilty Gear as well. Kind of like Guilty Gear, but I like it a lot better. Now, one of the things that really struck, I'm not going to talk about why I like it. I just like fighting games, and it's a really good one. It's like super complex and just really crunchy game mechanics. You know how I was talking about Nikkei, how the developers have put this crazy effort into the lore, into the story. They've done that with BlazBlue. It's got tons of single player content, but the best thing is, if you buy it now, as a guy who completely missed out on it the first time, you pay let's say you paid full price, it's like $60 or whatever. You're getting a full game. It's got like 35 characters in it, and there's only one DLC, and the DLC is a kind of cat samurai character that they decided to charge extra for. So you just get this massive amount of content for your game, for your money. I think I paid like 30 quid or 25 quid or something, which is about $30 US. And I was just like, like when I bought Tekken, I think Tekken costs like £60. And then every time a new character comes out, I have to pay like another 10 or 15 or 20 pounds for just to play one character. And yet BlazBlue Central Fiction's got like 35 characters. And it just reminded me of what games used to be like, where you didn't have to pay, it wasn't a game as a service, basically. And it really hit hard. I was like, I can't believe how good this game is. This is an S tier game in terms of effort, not just with how well put together it is. Like every single one of the 35 characters plays completely differently. It's mad. It's almost like learning a new game each time you learn a new character. It's that different. And it's so well balanced. It's just mad. Okay, it is like the third game I think it's the third or fourth game in a series. So they had time to build up the characters, and I understand that. It's an iterative thing. You can't really look at Dominion 6 in isolation of the games that came before, can you? But still, it just really made me realize just how much the games industry has degenerated into pure money making. When you see how much effort some of these developers used to put into games, even just 10 years ago, compared to what they're putting in now. And, I don't care about excessively amazing graphics. If that is what is causing games to have to be monetized to the hilt, then I'll just take the simpler game. I'll just play older games. So yeah, that's what I've been playing. I've been playing the hell out of it. I love it. I'm starting to get RSI in my hand from using my arcade stick, because I'm waking up in the morning early before work and banging out this, trying to do all the combos and stuff.
Yeah, I've been actually trying to play more normie games, I guess. The problem is because I've never really used the controller. I've started to try and use the controller. And I always get like my hands always.
His hands are too big. That's why you can't hold the controllers properly.
Yeah, but my hands hurt after playing a while. So, and I'm really bad at using a controller. I actually tried to play a Cyberpunk with a controller. And I was just the whole time I was thinking I'll be able to play this so much better with a thing. I found it so funny. I could actually see the auto aim stuff coming in, where I could see the bullets moving away from the crosshair. Oh dear. But anyway, what have I been playing? Campaign Series Vietnam, which just got like a remaster.
I've got that game.
Yeah, a matrix delivering game, which is a platoon-based sort of war game. I've only just started. I'm just going through the tutorials, but I'm really enjoying it. And I've just been shifting towards these types of games because 4X games have been just terrible recently. Sorry.
Yeah.
The only one I enjoy playing is Distant Worlds 2, and I can't play anything else really at the moment. So, yeah, I've been getting into that. I've also, Matrix has decided to stop doing a physical. So I've managed to grab a bunch of like hardcover manuals and stuff like that for a bunch of their games. So I'll be shifting towards those.
You're going to have a lot of games to play, mate. You're going to have a lot of content.
I've bought a load of them. So,
man, any one of those games that you bought that you were telling me about will give you hundreds of hours of gameplay if you really get into it.
yeah.
I mean, I've got that Campaign Series Vietnam game. It's really good. It's like it's based on the John Tiller system, but more so. It's like more complex, more deep. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and it's been updated. I mean, it's quite an old game, but like I said, it's just had this remaster. So, yeah, looking forward to playing more of that. Sean, what have you been playing?
Get a lot of these guys talking about their joysticks and their repetitive strain injuries. I actually have been trouble getting my hands used to controllers again myself because my PC died, like the motherboard died, and it took me about a week and a half to get a replacement. So I was playing a lot of stuff on my Steam Deck, and I'm not really used to it, even though I actually quite like it because it's large and I can, get my hands around it. It's cool, but it did take me a bit to get a hang of the controls. So what have I been playing? Well, first off, real quick, there's a Steam Next Fest going at the moment, and I played a few games off that. I don't play hours of them or whatever, just enough to get an idea of what it's about and, see if it actually runs, which some of them don't. So I played one called Chains of Freedom, which is kind of like a Mutant Year Zero kind of thing. Combat I thought was a bit bog standard, but then it introduced some new stuff that was kind of cool. Like there's a crystal thing, and there's some cool lore with like some kind of virus that like converts people to monsters or whatever. And then there's some cool lore. And then I was playing one called Dagger Directive, which gives me kind of original, like early Delta Force Ghost Recon kind of vibes, which was pretty cool, which was great up until the point where it froze because I ran up some stairs. So anyway, and then there was another one called As We Descend, which is like a roguelite card battler thing, which I'm kind of over because everyone and the dog seems to be trying to make one of them, but this one was a little different. It was like really nice artwork, and there was a whole story thing about, you're defending a city against monsters, and it's not just you with a bunch of cards. Like you've got units you can recruit, and then they've all got their own attack cards and that kind of thing. So there's like a squad management thing behind it as well, which is pretty cool. And so that's mostly the ones that I've been playing, at least the ones that I, was really enjoying on the Next Fest. And then also mainly, well, because I only had my Steam Deck for a while, I have been playing a crap ton of Door Kickers 2 again because it finally hit 1.0 and reset all my progress, and I did not even care. Went straight back in and did a bunch of campaign stuff again. And no, it's really good, like what they've done with it. They've still got the original stuff that came with it, and they've overhauled the mechanics. There's now a doctrine system where it's kind of like an RPG sort of skill system, and then they've got campaigns, which are like a roguelite repeatable game mode, which is I think it's harder than the normal missions, but it's got a whole thing where like your units, when they get injured, they may still be injured in the next mission. Like there's a whole bunch of like squad management stuff there. So that was really good. And I also played a bit of Space Marine 2. Oh, Raven's Watch. So Raven's Watch, it's a co-op, again, roguelite thing. I don't really know what kind of game you call it, actually. It's a co-op game. And you run around and you've got like 3 days of in-game time, and then you get forced in to go and fight the boss of the level. And I've been playing with my siblings because it's cross-platform. I was playing on Steam Deck, and then they were playing on PC. One of them was playing on Xbox, and so it's cool. And so we've been running around that. I've actually been really enjoying playing it because the classes are really well designed. I don't know how many classes there are. I've only unlocked like 4 of them, but they're really, really cool. I've been playing as one. It's basically like, I don't know how they got this to work without getting hit with some sort of like IP infringement thing, but I'm pretty sure he's called like Geppetto or something, and he runs around and he's basically like the doll maker from Pinocchio. He's got like these training dummy things that he can spawn in and then empower them, and they just like launch themselves around the map and bash stuff up. Super cool. So I've been playing that, and also played a very little bit of Elite Dangerous. I've been watching some videos and news stuff about them lately because I kind of fell off it when it seemed like Frontier were done with it, basically. But now they've really come back with a vengeance. So I downloaded that and checked it out. I got Odyssey, the expansion that apparently sucked when it launched, but I had a quick go at it, and it seems all right now. Well, it seems pretty good, actually. Yeah, so I've only had a very short look at that, but I kind of want to dive down that rabbit hole again. And I think that's it.
That's one of my most played games on Steam, Elite Dangerous. I had a lot of fun with that. That was the reason why I bought my first very expensive graphics card and Oculus Rift, because I really wanted to play it in 3D. Man, that's a good game. Like, Elite Dangerous is a really good game. The problem is, I think, at least with the content that it had before, it never really felt like anything you did had a big effect in the world around you. So that was why I stopped playing, because I've got about 200 hours, 250 hours, something like that. And I played with my brother. And if you're playing with with a team or with other people, it's so much fun. Because even just doing deliveries, it's just fun if you do it with other people. You can just chat as you play and listen to music. You get into a fight, and the combat mechanics are amazing. Yeah, it's a cracking game. I was disappointed by Odyssey though. I didn't really understand the point of that.
Yeah, well, I've only got about 50 hours on Steam, but I was originally playing it through their own client before it launched on Steam, and I'd have some ungodly amount of hours on there. Like, we're talking hundreds of hours, and that's sort of why I fell off after a while as well. I sort of was like, oh, there's not much going on, and everything just felt super grindy and annoying. Like, I tried to run around and do the engineer thing, and it goes, oh, you've got to fly to this place that's 5,000 light years away and get some parts or whatever, and I just kind of got over it. But I know for a while there I was also playing in VR. I had an Xbox controller with like the keyboard that you could plug into the controller, and I had a ship and I was just flying around. I could not do combat for the life of me in that, but I'm flying around doing mining and exploring stuff, and that was pretty sick. So yeah, no, with all the work they've been doing on it, and I'm really keen to go back and have a proper look at it.
Yeah, that's a game I really need to play. I played some of the betas because I actually kickstarted that game because as I've mentioned before, like Elite was basically one of the first games I ever had on my first computer, which was a BBC Micro. So I go way back with that game, and I played Elite Frontiers on the Atari ST for, oh God knows, I probably played that game for a year. So I've been a big fan of Elite, but yeah, I really need to get back and give that another go.
I remember when Elite 2 was out, Elite 2 Frontier. I played the hell out of it. Got a copy of it off my friend got a copy of it from our kung fu teacher, who was, gave us, what did he give my friend? He gave him a copy of Doom. He gave him a copy of TIE Fighter. I think it was TIE Fighter, X-Wing as well, the original X-Wing game, LucasArts stuff, and Dune 2. And he gave him, for Elite 2 Frontier. And God, that game sucked my life away. That was the first game I would say I was actually addicted to the point where it was affecting my life in a big way. So it's actually funny because my Commander X16, one of the demo games that came with it, is somebody has made a version of Elite, the original, where you actually there's no combat in it, there's no flight, but it kind of simulates the flight for you. But it's got all the trading mechanics and a load of other stuff in there as well. It's kind of interesting just to see how the game plays if you don't actually have to actually fly the ship yourself. Anyway, folks, are you done, Drexy? You had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't put it down. I was going to mention No Man's Sky, but I won't bother.
Oh, I played a little of that too, so you can if you want.
Another game I just quickly want to mention, which I haven't played, but I want to play because I guess it's the same with Elite, where it came out pretty rough, but has improved over time, is No Man's Sky. Have any of you played that?
No, my friend Tom from my gaming group is playing it and he loves it. I think he's actually going to come on the podcast at some point and talk about it because I think he's got a lot to say about it. And I'd be really, really interested to hear. I keep seeing it for sale, but I've got so many of those space trading games now. And honestly, I love X. So I play X4. That's something I've been playing actually this week. I actually picked up X4 Foundations again, and I started playing some of the DLC missions that I just never bothered with before. And I was pleasantly surprised at just how good they are. What I really like about that, by the way, is that the developers have really made a very positive feeling game. It feels like Star Trek, like when you're going out and exploring and you're meeting these alien races, and it's just really positive feeling. It's not all kind of always dark and dingy and with these constant backstabbing and betrayal and Game of Thrones crap. It's just old school, exploring the galaxy, meeting new civilizations and helping them out and doing. You're the good guy. Do you know what I mean? I really like it. I think it's a breath of fresh air in today's climate.
I'm too scared to load X4 anymore because last time I loaded it, I played for 90 hours in the week.
Yeah, I've done that.
But I think No Man's Sky is quite different because you're on a planet collecting resources, stuff like that. So I wouldn't compare it to Explore, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. It's more like a survival-y kind of thing. There's a game loop that always used to bug the crap out of me with No Man's Sky, but they brought in these granular settings where you don't really have to deal with it so much anymore. It was like you'd constantly be refining stuff into other stuff, and it's just there. So yeah, now they brought in these granular settings. I grabbed some mods that do some cool stuff and just like little quality of life things. And yeah, no, I've been playing a bit of that, and it's pretty sick actually. So.
Right, guys, let's wrap up. Thanks for both coming on and chatting about games again. I think it's really cool to check out what's going on in the news from time to time, because we are able to kind of just keep abreast of what's going on in the general gaming industry. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thank you, Drexy, and thank you, Shaun.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, cheers, man.
You're always welcome. Okay, guys, this was Ben, Drexy, and Shaun for Meta Abuse. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.